any wargame, anytime.
All right, we are back with another episode, and what an opportunity to bring in a really awesome guest, someone we've been wanting to have on the podcast for a while now. But before that, I am joined by Sam. Sam, how you doing, man?
Oh, doing all right. Fighting a little bit of a cold, but other than that, doing pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah, I've been a little. I guess it's just my sinuses. I don't know if it's a cold or I know I got sick, and I think I had this lingering sinus stuff going on. So, but um, just one of those things. So, our guest is the creator of Universal Battles 2. Um, Super cool guy, Lorenzo. How you doing, man?
Hey guys, all good. Thank you for having me. Bit
Yeah.
cold as well.
Yeah, a
So
little cold too. We were talking about that. We've all got some, it's around that time of the year.
yep,
So, but
kid bringing it in.
so as the creator of Universal Battles, so Universal Battles, and then you have two, right? So it's like the second version of the thing,
Right.
um, which has been around a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about your history into wargaming. How did what's your history into wargaming?
Yeah, so I mean, again, Universal Battle 2, because obviously there was a Universal Battle 1, and before then there was something that had a different name that was not as appealing as Universal Battle, but it was pretty much the same application. But yeah, pretty much I started the application about 20 years ago. This is because that time I had kind of like I was playing some Warhammer and other games, but the problem that I had was that it was very difficult to find a place where I could play with with people that knew how to play Warhammer or any other board games like that. And so the only place I found was at that time I used to live in Italy, Naples, was about an hour and a half drive from my home. And so I would just kind of like drive there, be there a few hours, then I had to drive back. Sometimes I couldn't drive, and also traffic in Naples is insane. So it might take you an hour, it might take you 3 hours, who knows? And so I started thinking like, of ways of kind of like allowing me to play a bit more often with those people in that shop. And so at that time, it was really difficult to kind of like even uh, uh, create a game like this just by myself. So the very first prototype that I created was built in HTML, PHP, and a little bit of JavaScript. And it was extremely raw and bare, essentially. Like you had to know each other, you had to call each other with a phone,
Yeah.
and then you had to refresh the page manually. Like I'm ready, refresh, and you would refresh it.
Mhm.
So that was the first prototype. But this was 2004. So yeah, 20 years ago. And
Which is
so
impressive for that time. Like 2004,
yeah,
technology
no,
was, yeah, it was not what it is today. So yeah.
yeah, it was literally just a group of maybe like 10 kids just wanting to play and didn't really have the time to go into a shop and play on a weekly basis. So essentially that's how we used to play at that time. But that's pretty much how my experience with wargaming started. I mean, I've always been a fan of fantasy in general, Dungeons and Dragons, but also like at that time Warhammer um was really popular, especially in Italy. A lot of people were playing. Again, unfortunately, not very close to my home, so that's why the idea for the application started. But maybe that was a good thing, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have Universal Battle now.
Well, yeah, and I think it speaks to the legacy of Warhammer the game that you were so inspired and wanted to play so badly that you created an app that is, I mean, when I think about playing rank and flank games, I couldn't imagine playing on anything other than Universal Battles. Just it's a application. We'll get into a little bit of specifics, but I mean, like it is. you know, so I think that's really a legacy of Warhammer, right? That it brought about this, this
Yeah,
passion to board
that's how it
games.
started. I mean, it
Oh,
started with rank and flank. Obviously now, and in fact, I do play as well other games that are not specifically rank and flank. But at that time, I actually did speak with Games Workshop. This was even before the application actually was born. I speak with Games Workshop to try to figure out a way, maybe with their funding, to create something a bit more premium, maybe to
mhm.
get a team of people to kind of like help with this. Unfortunately, that didn't really go anywhere. But yeah, the main idea was to play games that are rank and flank. At that time there were not a lot of them that you could play, but there were enough that obviously it picked up the interest of many.
Okay. So, so real quick, so you're talking about, okay, what games are you enjoying right now? Just personally
So
speaking.
currently, I mean,
Yeah.
so I've not played Warhammer in a very long time, actually,
Oh,
and probably over 10 years at this point. Currently, I find myself playing a lot of one-page rule,
yeah. Yeah.
especially the skirmish, the fantasy skirmish, and also the grimdark future skirmish as well, because those are kind of like short and you can probably play in an hour. You can definitely play a nice 250, 300 points pretty easily, and they're fun to play. The rules are very easy to remember, and sometimes I call friends that that don't really play a lot, and I can teach them the whole rule in like 10 minutes, right? Where if I have to play a little bit more like Kings of War or something like that, then it becomes a bit more of a long, much longer session, right, to explain at least the rules. So I find myself playing mostly OPR. Nowadays, if you ever see me on UB2, I'm probably playing OPR.
That's awesome. And like, OPR, yeah, I mean, we do a lot of OPR over here. And you're right. I mean, you can play, I guess I think traditionally it's rank and flank, but the truth is I've played Grimdark Future on Universal Battles too. I've played some other games there. It's
Yeah.
really pretty unique in that you can play different games other than rank and
Oh yeah,
flank.
yeah.
And it's not hard, really.
No.
Um, so I think it's
The
awesome. So
idea, by the way, there is to keep it as a sandbox. I mean, the main idea of Universal Battle has always been and sometimes I have to remind people that maybe would like features for specific games that are a little bit more specific. I have to remind people like that the Universal Battle, it is a sandbox.
oh
And
yeah.
you can technically play anything you want. Like technically, if you wanted to play a card game or chess or anything you can possibly imagine, you can create it with your friends and you can play on Universal Battle because there are those tools allowed, right? And like with OPR, especially skirmish, there is actually, because skirmish was also in rank and flank, you had the ability to distantiate those units, right, with skirmish. So technically, you can already do it. There is a little button when you're creating an army, you just click the skirmish button and then the unit automatically distantiate. And then you can use the circle round base, which honestly, it's not really that much of a difference. I mean, it's kind of there and you can easily play, whatever skirmish game you want at this point. So
Yeah, and that's how me and you got because I worked on it to get Mage Knight. I had some friends that like, Mage Knight is one of those games too that it's very passionate, small community. And I've been playing from friends on Mage Knight just here and there
yeah.
because you're right. You like that's how we actually started is me learning how to build a new game into Universal Battles too. Wasn't that hard. And you're right. I think that um that sandbox mentality of it is so great. And so you're already getting into a few features. Let's kind of dive a little bit into because let's suppose obviously me and Sam we both know of Universal. There's a lot of people who know, but let's talk to someone who's not really
Never
doesn't
really
know doesn't really know a
requested
lot about it.
Universal
Let's talk about
Battle.
some of these great features.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, so
so
essentially, Universal Battle, just for people that never heard about it, it's it's a simulator. It's a sandbox. You can play on your PC, on your Mac, on your browser, on your iOS device, on Android device. It's really available on any platform. You can download it on any platform. And think about it as a sandbox. The main idea of it, and you know that to me is very, very important, is that there is a lot of user content generated stuff like models, for example, like people that use Universal Battle can go in there and they can actually model their own army, right? That to me was always one of the most important thing because one of the nice thing about playing, for example, Warhammer or OPR or things like that, it's like the creation act
Yeah,
of
yeah.
where you're creating your army, when you're painting your model, when you're putting it together, and then you feel really proud about that army. And that's one aspect that Universal Battle has, and it's extremely important. So when you log in Universal Battle, you're gonna see immediately all of the models created by all of the other users, and there's thousands over thousands. So if you don't want to create your army, you can use the army created by somebody else. And there is a nice search feature in there. You can go search the army, and you're most likely you're gonna find like 30 or 40 of the same army, and then you just pick the one that you want. You can clone pieces of one army into another army if you want, so you can really combine all of those things. And then once you join a room with another person, obviously this is a multiplayer game. Once you join a room, then you come up with the rules that you want. Obviously, you have dice that you can use. You have tools, meters, your own army, your own models, and you can also create your own maps and again your own tools. If you want to play OPR, you'll agree upon those rules, and then you'll play OPR. If you want to play any other game, you'll do the same for those. So that's pretty much the concept of Universal Battle.
Yeah, and I love that. And so if you ever, some people may be more familiar with Tabletop Simulator. It's sort of, to me, it's Tabletop Simulator, but a little more, I would say it's fine-tuned to
Specialized.
it's
Yes.
very specialized, and it's like it's for war gaming. Really, you can play other things, but so many of the tools make it so like
Yes.
I get Tabletop Simulator it's got its things, but it is so clunky.
Right.
In fact, me and Boz, who can't make it, he's got family stuff. We're trying to play a game of OPR on Tabletop Simulator, and it took us like 2 or 3 sessions just to sort of get the game set up. And and I'm looking forward to bringing him onto Universal Battles and being like, look, there you go. And you're right, the fact that you only, I mean, Tabletop Simulator also is extremely difficult on horsepower. I got a pretty solid computer, and still that thing will chug at times just on Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah.
I
Essentially,
think,
it's playing on Universal Battle. I mean, at least from kind of like when I have developed it, the main idea was how can I make these as easy as possible and as fast as possible to access. So say if you're a person that does play Universal Battle and you want to play with a friend of yours that has never heard Universal Battle before, you can literally send them a link, and within seconds you can play with them. They don't have to pay anything. They don't have to do any of that. Because, I mean, as you know, a lot of Universal Battle is free. There are some premium features, but you could literally play the whole thing for free as much as you want. In fact, recently I have introduced a lot of like new free armies that anybody can use anytime. The main idea of Universal Battle was not to make money. It was always to just allow people that wanted to play whenever they want.
yeah, and it is such a like especially when you like the thing of convenience. Like for me, as a person I use it for Warhammer, but I've also used it a lot for Kings of War. And you can play tournaments on Universal Battles because you can literally, we call it play by email. It's not email, but basically you can play your turn, save the game state, and just send it to people. And you play tournaments. You can go, and it is such a great thing that you really can, to be able to do your turn and then send it to someone. Now, something like OPR that's a little more back and forth, you can be there in person, but other games that are more like I go, you go, you really can work it out with your opponent. You can play an entire turn, sort of roll your opponent's defensive saves, and just sort of like send them back the details. And that's what I like about Universal Battles. It is a little more streamlined for like players who are going to sort of like you don't need to have the full rule books in the app, right? It's just, okay, this is the rules we agreed on, that sort of thing. You talk to these people in person. But like I really go and check it out. We're going to send the links and promote it because you're right. You can play for free. If you want to have your custom army, if you want to do things like saving your game
Right.
states,
Right.
there
But
is, but the
even
premium
saving,
is nothing. The
yeah, I
premium
agree. I
is
mean,
nothing. What is it like? Was it like $30 a year? I want 36 or 30. It's something ridiculously cheap, but it
and
comes
then
out
there
to
is
like,
obviously different tiers. If you just want to try, it's very cheap. You can try for $1.99.
yeah. I mean, like it's
But again, this is literally just if you want, if you say, hey, of these million different armies that are free, I don't like them, and I just want my own, and I want to save it on Universal Battle server, and I want to be able to access it from anywhere in any other app, then yeah, obviously, you pay, right, for that. That makes sense. But if you just, even if, let's say, if I'm a pro member of Universal Battle, but you're not, I don't have to ask you to
yeah.
pay.
Yep.
I can just be the one that creates the army for you and then allow you to play with it. So things like that, just to make it a bit easier for everybody. By the way, one thing, you mentioned play by email. One big important thing about Universal Battle, and I think that's also how we met. This was about a different feature. It's the play by email was very difficult with Universal Battle. Then I noticed that there was a group on Facebook that plays Kings of War exclusively with play by email, and they were discussing about missing features. It just happened for me to stumble upon their group, and then I started literally reading all of their comments and implementing all of those features. And I think when we met, we were discussing about um, how could we create kind of like those rules that kind of change based on your
On
on
your
your
wounds you
wounds, things
take.
like that.
Yeah, your wounds you
And
take.
so,
Yeah,
but as
changing
always
stats of the
been,
unit. Yeah.
it has always been like this, and for the past 20 years, like the majority of the features that you currently see Universal Battle, it's literally people contacting me either on Discord or email, whatever, and asking me is like, hey, how hard would it be, or wouldn't it be cool if we could have these in Universal Battle, and then me just implementing that feature.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's the culmination of like many people just like bringing their ideas to my attention and then me developing it.
Yeah. And I think that's the reason a lot of people support Universal Battles because it allows these new features to come about. Now, is there anything planned ahead for Universal Battles too? Like, is there any thing down the pipe that new
So
features
the
that are
one
coming out?
thing, and we talked about this, I really want to expand on the fantasy side, on the sci-fi side, because obviously there is a ton of fantasy, but not a lot of sci-fi. I mean, as you probably maybe you have noticed, I have introduced as recently some robots and
Yep.
spaceships, but I really want to expand a bit more on that, especially because I've been playing a lot of Grimdark as well, and I realized that it's like, I just wish, especially with the maps, there is really not a lot for sci-fi. I mean, you can get creative and still play it and it'd be fine. But obviously fantasy is the first, right, that was created, and so obviously has a lot more content. So I'm probably gonna spend some time, and maybe, if you want, I know we talked about this, maybe we could work together on that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love I've played some Grimdark Future and it is, I mean, it's a great system that again, I played both, but Tabletop Simulator, it's just you really have to have someone who's a committed person who's going to just go through a lot of documentation and a lot of that stuff. Not that I, but so and, and you're getting into, but the other thing that I think that kind of it's great for you to come on now is that the old world is here, and um, really you can play Warhammer the Old World with it's really just out the box ready, right? I mean, a lot of
Pretty
the you supported the Warhammer, you supported Ninth Age, you support Kings of War. I mean, you support me, and so really, if you are an old world player, you know the
Yeah,
rules with someone, you can play old world with
for
very
sure. Yeah,
it's direct, right? The army. So
yeah.
I think so. So what about, I mean, do you think that you'll be getting some old world players in the future? It seems like it's such a great just direct crossover, right? From Universal
Yeah,
Battle.
I hope so. I mean, and I'd be curious to know what would be the alternative, you know? Like, why not, right? And maybe if there is any missing feature, right, that could be the reason. I'd be happy to obviously discuss and implement those features. But yeah, I think, you know, it just makes sense. You said it just makes sense at this point. You know, that'd be the easiest, right, for anybody wanting to play multiplayer
I
online.
mean, for me, I will be using I will be doing some I'm gonna be playing some old world in person. I'm getting my dwarfs ready right now. But as
Yeah.
far as doing some more competitive testing and some more army testing, I mean I'm gonna be using just like I did for Kings of War and Warhammer
Oh yeah.
before, I'm gonna be using universal battles to test, to say, hey, before I start building this unit out or this army out, let's test it on universal battles against someone else, you
Yeah.
know, and that way I can sort of see how it plays out. Oh, let me make some tweaks. Maybe I'll include this unit. And
Yeah.
to me, that's a big deal. I mean, if you're going to paint and buy these models, you really do want the army to play as you feel it should play.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I would encourage anyone who's doing some old world like me. I'm definitely going to be doing some old world content in person, but also in universal battles. And I am really interested in seeing where the old world sort of falls on the competitive scale.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I do personally do use it for testing as well. Because even with OPR, you know, you gotta print the whole thing and then you gotta paint it, you gotta make it look good. And you know, then you go and test it and it just doesn't make sense. But you know, at least now you can test it before you print it and paint it, you know. Um, and I've already tested, I don't know, like maybe like 20 different armies. And so now I'm printing the one that I like and painting the one that I like. But you know, I had to do a few different games sessions with a few friends before I decided on one.
yeah.
So that's definitely
And Age of Fantasy is pretty much that's a direct copy over. If you play any Age of Fantasy army,
oh
you
yeah.
can pretty much play it in. I mean, because you're right, that's where the kind of a lot more of the content you have sci-fi, but
Yeah.
so that includes for regiments too as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Age of Fantasy is perfect. I mean, you can play very, very quickly any army that you see on Age of Fantasy for sure.
Mhm. What about so for you? You've kind of mentioned a few, and so we can. You say you've. Do you have a favorite faction, or do you have like lore? Is there some? I know,
Yeah.
obviously, we could start. But you really got to pick. You got to pick a favorite, and I mean
Yeah.
lore and model wise. It could be fantasy or
Yeah.
sci-fi, or just. It doesn't even have to be OP or anything. Just if it's something here. But what
Yeah.
is just from in wargaming? What
Yeah.
is you got to pick a favorite faction,
Oh yeah.
lore
Yeah.
and model wise?
Well, so I think, you know, my first faction was Orcs and Goblins. And it's kind of a weird pick for me. In fact, still today I play Orcs with Age of Fantasy. It was a weird pick for me when I chose that in Warhammer Fantasy because I'm usually, you know, I just don't feel like an orc or goblin personally, right? I'm very precise. So I would have expected more like an elf or something like that. But instead, I kind of like the behavior, the fact that there is still RNG. Because, you know, like when I play, I just don't like I don't like playing with people that take these games too seriously.
Mhm.
Just bothers me, right? And there is something about orcs and goblins that keeps the RNG always alive with their animosity and whatever, you know, like something is always going to go wrong, you know, even though you have planned the whole thing, it's just going to bust something and it's just going to be crazy, right? And that part I love because it's so out of your control that then you can really focus on playing rather than like thinking like, oh, have I really applied all the points in the right way? And, just focusing on the wrong aspect of the gameplay. So
You
yeah,
know,
well, goblins.
yeah, and it's interesting because in a previous episode we talked about some of the lore and um when you mentioned orcs and goblins, we won't you can watch the episode, but one of the things that just jumps out, like we got into a point talking about how can a company improve on Games Workshop orcs and goblins where they're obviously powerful, they're scary, but they have so much personality there.
Yeah.
And you're right, like
It's kind of
and
why they've been iconic for so long now.
yeah,
It's that depiction. When people think of orcs and goblins now, that's kind of the depiction of orcs and goblins they think of.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like even more so than Lord of the Rings. Like I think GW has taken orcs and goblins and really made them just what I think the world thinks about them now. And
Mhm.
it's a really it's like and it's so funny that you're like I wouldn't have picked you as an orc and goblin player either, but I do the Warhammer fantasy has it still. 40K started to move away from that. You're right, that real quirkiness where they've sort of been, but I love you're right that early 40K, that Warhammer version of because you feel like you're playing an army that's just cobbled together and you're constantly
Right.
having to
Right.
beat people and like yeah
Yeah.
it's oh
You
man
you have to feel a bit out of control when you're playing, I feel. And that adds a lot more fun to it. I feel that with some armies where they're maybe a little bit too stiff, and maybe there is too much control over the army. I don't know, it just kind of like gets a little bit of the fun away from it, where again, orcs and
Well,
goblins.
there's nothing worse than feeling like you got rules lawyered into a
Exactly.
defeat.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's just a real bad feeling
Yeah.
when that happens.
Also, maybe when you lose with orcs and goblins, it's not really your fault, right? So it's like, it just happened, right? You can try again tomorrow. So it's not.
As there's always there's more where those came from.
Yeah, exactly.
now you mentioned fun, are you more of a it sounds like you're more of a fun player, you're not too interested or competitive, or am I wrong on that? How do you fall in the fun competitive spectrum?
No, I'm very in the fun spectrum. No,
Yeah.
not competitive for sure. Never actually done any competitive play or anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
just for fun. Yeah,
And
like
that's really cool. Yeah. It's really interesting though, because Universal Battles 2 is certainly a application that has been heavily used in tournaments and is so good for it, right? I mean, like it is so it you can be so well about being so careful about your unit adjustments. Like,
yeah.
like when you play in person, and I love playing in person, you're never going to get that exact
Yeah. Well, I would
that
say
sort of exact effect.
I personally have not done tournaments, but I have supported many tournaments.
Yeah.
So whenever there is a tournament and they are using Universal Battle, I always get interested, talk to the organizers, make sure, again, many features that currently exist in Universal Battle were born during tournaments. Organizers contacting me and asking me to add specific features, right? So that part, I understand, and I love that part of it. But personally, never really. I don't know if it was time or just haven't really found one. Having been invited to a few, but never really actually done it.
Okay. Well, I mean, and that's a great thing that as me and Sam that are more tournament players, we do have to forget that there's a much wider world out there of people who
Yeah,
aren't so interested in the competitive aspect, and we're interested in it too. And so it's that's good. It's good that like this hobby is
yeah,
an open net that you can really sort of pursue different veins. And for
And
you,
you don't have to be, and you don't. And as far as like game design and balance goes too, it's not they're not in contrast to each other.
right.
You can have a game that's good for a competitive crowd, but it's still fun to play. Like you don't have to compromise on one or the other. I think people oftentimes think that they have to, and somehow like if it's going to be super competitive, it can't be kind of fun and wacky, and
Right.
I think that's not true. I think you can. That's kind of a laziness in game design if you think that way.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and I wanted to see, I do want to dive into a quick side point because you did mention pitching this to GW, and I want to just sort of explore that a little bit. What would you, first of all, do you think that GW would ever do something like this? And
You know, so this was a very long time ago. So this was
yeah,
over 20 years ago.
I'm willing to bet they're thinking it's a mistake now that they didn't. GW does not exactly have a good track record of
no,
passing up on opportunities that could have made them a lot of money. Very few people know this anymore, but Warcraft was originally pitched as a Warhammer video game, right?
Mm,
And they couldn't get the rights, so they made their own stuff. And you've got to know that some GW execs years later were like, "Oh man, we we made a bad decision on that one."
Yeah,
yeah,
no, for sure. I mean, again, and this was a long time ago, again, over 20 years ago. Also, at that time, I used to still live in Italy. I live in the States now, but so that was me talking to some Italian GW office, which maybe that also was the wrong thing for me
yeah. I
to
don't
do.
think so. I mean, I think that you could have talked to the president and he would have like, it's a great idea. I'm going to pass.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably, probably, you know, but also, I wonder if, I don't know, if that was, if it may be better this way, right? Because at that time, obviously, Warhammer was the big thing and everybody was playing it. Nowadays, there is so many other games that people can play. And honestly, for example, we keep talking about OPR. I do prefer OPR over Warhammer, right?
Mhm.
At
Yeah.
this point right now.
It's a good
And,
game. I mean,
you
it's
know,
a solid system that works
exactly.
really
Yeah,
well. And like you said, if you have two people who know how to play OPR, you can sit down and play a game in 45 minutes.
exactly.
And
That's the
that's
beauty
some
of it.
yeah.
You know, it's like, wanting to play chess or checkers with a friend. I mean, even chess, right? You can explain the rules very briefly. You can have a fun, quick match, right? I mean, obviously, if you have to play a tournament, that's a whole different ballpark. But at least with this, you can quickly play. And and maybe if GW had interest at that time, maybe it would have changed the whole thing, and maybe this would be only for Warhammer, or people would only be able to play
Mhm.
Warhammer. Again, I don't like it to be
It's
specific.
probably, you're right. It's probably better because now this is an agnostic tool that
Exactly.
GW can't
Yeah.
sort of squash, right?
Right.
So I think you're right. I think it worked out for the better. Thank you, GW, for not
G,
being competent.
surely GW wouldn't squash a beloved thing that.
All
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
right. So we have a running question that we like to ask our guests. Now you can um put aside Universal, but we're talking about ultimate gaming fantasy. So we asked this question before. If time and money, okay, so time and money are not a factor. You got all the time and all the money in the world. You are, some, Jeff Bezos. You have that level of money. What would be your dream wargaming experience? So I mean, like,
Yeah.
no bar. Like, what is your dream wargaming experience?
And you mean for me personally, or
Oh
for the
yeah, well
best?
yeah, you can make it as broad or as crazy as you want to. You just I
Yeah.
would this is the way I like to say it. No bar, no bars. There's,
Yeah.
you have the time, you've got the money, you've got
It,
everything.
Yeah.
What would be the dream wargaming
Yeah,
experience?
I think twofolds, right? So to me, there is the aspect that maybe I might have missed because I've played so much of online and multiplayer, that there is one side that it's kind of like the in-person playing. I just wish that there was more of it and more available, right? So if as a project that I would love to even sponsor, right? Just imagine like a lot more resources to stores that do allow patrons to come in and play and really have a great time, right? I mean, obviously there is a lot of shops that already do that, but you know, they're not really supported
Yeah.
the times, I guess, right? Especially from GW or others similar, right? So I think being able to sponsor, if money was not a problem, being able to sponsor all of those and create even more of them, just to give a little bit more access and vicinity, right, to people that do want to play in person, right? From a tech standpoint, obviously I'm a tech guy. This is something I've actually been thinking for in the past year with VR and AR, coming along, Vision Pro coming out and, the Quest 3. I actually did do some experiments, not really successful. I don't think we're there yet, but I was imagining, like, what if you could have the experience of building a model and painting a model inside VR experience or inside an AR experience, and then creating that whole harmony and then somehow really make it feel good within VR or AR. I think that could be really interesting. I think there is still some issues in VR that we're probably not going to see solved within the next couple of years, but it's definitely coming, and that's what. And by the way, there is a likely chance that Universal Battle 3 might actually be VR at some point. But
Oh, wow. My
not
goodness.
today, not today. It's
Yeah.
the technology I don't think is there yet.
Well, as it's kind of you're a techie person, VR is, it's still in its infancy phases, but it is coming. And I think, I think that's really cool that you're sort of already thinking there. That is so cool. That is so cool. Oh man. Well,
Yeah, I have, by the way, I've done some experiments, and so one thing that actually bothers me, maybe more than others, is in VR, is it's essentially is a technology that Meta is actually working on. It's called varifocal. It's the inability for your eyes to focus when you bring an object very close to your face.
yeah.
And so, because every object needs to stay at a specific distance in order for it to be focused. If it's too far, if it's too close, it's not going to be in focus anymore. It's blurry. And the whole idea of creating a model, it's always like, I always think about myself with a model like straight right there in my face, looking at all the details and the paint and everything. So I think once the technology gets there where the varifocal is not a problem anymore, that's where what I have in mind might be able to be created at that point, right? Because I really want to recreate the experience of modeling and painting and creating your own army. And the whole user generated content, I think that's, to me at least, that's one of the most fun parts of the whole wargaming.
That'd be pretty cool. And somehow like have that VR is translated to some sort of hands somewhere else in the world that's actually painting it in real. So as you're doing it in the
Like a
VR,
robot.
and then you get the model sent to you.
Yeah. You've got to like people in some third world country with chips in their head, right?
No, it would be no. I wouldn't do that. No. I'm not going there. No, it would be a robot. It would be
No, you can technically already do it with some printers, right?
Yeah.
They kind of like do color. They're not great right now, but I'm sure by in a few years,
Mhm.
they'll be a lot better.
Man, like that is so cool. So and well anyway, we're gonna put all this stuff in here, but tell us, can you tell someone, and we'll put all these links, but where can they go to learn more about Universal Battles too?
So on the website, universalbattle2.com, you should be able to find most information. There is FAQs. There is also a Discord channel where you can join and you can ask any question on that Discord channel. There is also a lot of other Discord servers that they're not linked directly on the website, but if you're already a member of one of those, you can probably ask about Universal Battle, and most likely somebody has played it. But yeah, I would say to start, go on the website, download, or if you don't want to play on your computer, on web, or you just want it on your iPad or on your tablet, Android, whatever, you can go on the iOS App Store or you can go on the Google Play Store. You can find Universal Battle there as well. You can download it. Registering is extremely simple. Put your email and your username and a password, and you're registered. And yeah, just start poking around and maybe connect with a friend and ask them to play your first match.
Nice. Well, I think we couldn't end this without, I think for myself, and I think countless other people who've been able to play war games, busy life or whatever, COVID, I think that a big thank you to the wargaming community for creating Universal Battles. I do talking with you personally. I know this is a labor of love for you. And so just from the wargaming community, just a big thank you so much for giving us Universal Battles.
No, thank you. That actually brings me a lot of joy seeing people play Universal Battle. And again, as I said, I've never really thought about it to make money. I just wanted to do something. And especially also during COVID, that really allowed a lot of people to play when they couldn't. But yeah, this is just a place for people to have fun, So that's the most important part for me.
Nice. Any last thoughts or anything to say, Sam? We'll let Lorenzo close out. Anything you got?
I think I'm good.
I'm good. Lorenzo, you got the last word.
Oh, again, thank you for having me, and just please have fun on Universal Battle 2. And as always, I'm open to feedback and the new features. Please connect with me on Discord, on the Universal Battle Discord, and I'd be happy to chat with anybody that has good suggestions.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Any war game, anytime.